to only overseeing her finances, and the court appointed another conservator for her personal life.
Hey, Linda, how you doing?
Says James
Good to see you today. We're going to be talking about this U.S. Census,
I'm Margie Zaraletta.
these results, and how they impact us. I hope you're doing well today. And of course, you know they did pass further voter restrictions in Texas after this long fight. The fight's not over. But you do need now John Lewis's family, in his memory, have stepped forward to press the president and the Congress to do all that they can to pass the For the People Act, which was Congressman Lewis's dying wish. So, hey, everybody, like and share, like and share. It's good to be with you today. Good to be with you today. Always a joy, always a joy. Hope that you are getting ready for a wonderful weekend. And let me turn off the ding on my phone. So please like and share, like and share, like and share. Like and share, like and share, like and share. Okay, Paul, how's everything sounding?
Everything sounds good.
Okay, good.
Also on the Bishop Ford Freeway. It's
always checking.
Cermak. The trip time is 14 minutes from 95th to downtown. Outbound it's 11 minutes. Bellwood, Washington is blocked.
So let me go on over here to
Taste of Bellwood
Facebook page.
That's traffic.
Linda, where are you living? Let me know where you are.
It looks to me like the only explanation that I can come up with is that they want more people to die. Now, why would they want more people to die? Well, because if they can get the pandemic rolling again here in the United States,
dialing in from Linda?
States to shut down, and if states shut down, then the economy goes in the tank. And if the economy goes in the tank, the party in power always loses the next election.
The Tom Hartman Radio Program, weekdays 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Hey, Dave, how you doing? Happy Lucky Friday the 13th, absolutely. Kevin Brooks, how you doing? Sean, how you doing? Very, very good. Paul, do we go on at 6:06 or just before 6:06?
Just before 6:06.
Like 6:05, 57?
6:05, 45.
45? Okay, because I had my time off. Thank you for letting me know that. Hey, everybody. Carol on the left coast. Dave up in Canada. All my brothers and sisters. Linda, where are you? Let me know. Shantae, where are you coming in from? Kevin, let me know where you're coming in from. We're going to be talking about the U.S. Census for the first time since 1790. That's when they started taking the census. The white population actually contracted, and America is now beginning to look more like the world. Most of the world, people of color, everybody. So we've got a lot to talk about today on that. How is that going to reshape us as a nation? And what does this really, really mean? Because black numbers held at 12%. Hispanic numbers ballooned to 18%. But is that the whole story? Back in just a minute.
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Friday the 13th, everybody. It's going to be a great day. It's already a great day. We're all here together. It's great to be with you. I'm Santita Jackson from WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I'm so glad to be with you today. I want to hear your voices today. Shelby, 773 278 773 763 WCPT. If you want to text us, GWC Injury Lawyers gives you that opportunity. But I want to hear your voices too. I've been hearing a lot from you this week, and it's been a joy. Shantae and Melissa and Shelby and Linda out there in the Mojave Desert out in California. Dave Dowling up in, well, you're up in Canada, but where are you in Canada? Let me know, Dave. Kevin Brooks and Carol Sosket out on the left coast. She's from Chicago. We're going to let them have you out there in LA. And Kenneth Rush and Melissa and everybody. Hey, Andre. Of course, I want you all to join my Morning Stars on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. The Santita Jackson and Friends page. Cannot wait to see more of you. And I love the conversations in which I find you engaging, not just throughout the show, but throughout the day. You've become a family and you are mine. It's great to be with you today. Let's talk about this U.S. Census today. What does it mean? America is more diverse than it has ever been for the first time in the history of our country. Since they've been taking the census survey since 1790, the white population has actually contracted. We're going to dig into those numbers, and we're going to continue to do that, not just today, but going forward, because I think that there's much more to this story. Now, people are identifying not just black and white or even indigenous. Now they're black, they're white, they're multiracial. Uh, what does it mean to be Hispanic? Is it a color or a culture? Because you have white Hispanics, you have black Hispanics, you have multiracial Hispanics. So what do those numbers really mean? And since black people are the only people in the world who are not able to be anything other than black, we cannot become white black people or anything other than black. The one drop rule is always applied to us. What do these numbers really mean about black people? What do they mean about our politics? What do they mean about our culture? Uh, there's so much to talk about. I just want your thoughts as we look at the headlines on on the U.S. Census. And of course, Dr. Deborah Verholden is going to be with us today. But she said, I want to really drill down on how it is that we can be healthy in this pandemic, because there's a lot more information coming out about these vaccines. Israel, which is 80% vaccinated, most people who are hospitalized there have been vaccinated. Why is that? And what can we learn from them so that we can protect ourselves? Something to think about, everybody. 80% vaccinated. Yeah, they've done quite the job over there getting the vaccines in arms. And even then, people don't have the complete protection, and they've not been able to stop hospitalization. So let's talk with her about that and what it is that you can do to protect yourself and to be as healthful as you can be. Everybody in Chicago, we're going to have a high of 78 degrees, partly cloudy. Ooh, what a relief. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 80 degrees, mostly sunny. It's been so hot and muggy here over the past few days. The Dow closed up 14 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed up 51 points, and the S&P 500 closed up 13 points. Wow, what a blowout. The Cubs are really struggling. The Brewers 17, the Cubs 4. Wow. Since they made those trades, broke up the team, the luck has not been good with the Cubs. Oops. What about the Field of Dreams game, everybody? Oh, don't you love that movie, Kevin Costner's movie? Well, it's the first time in the history of Major League Baseball that a Major League Baseball game has been played in Iowa, and they specially constructed a field, baseball field, next to the Field of Dreams set. And so, of course, Kevin Costner walked out dramatically. Oh, how fabulous it was. I saw the highlights. And it was a game for the ages, everybody. They slugged it out until the end, and the Chicago White Sox are triumphant over the New York Yankees, 9-8. Love it, love it, love it. But what a game it was. And hopefully this will inspire more baseball in more places, and hopefully in the inner city, because we don't have baseball in the inner city. At least our children, the Little League teams are not there anymore. We need more of that, because we need more of our American kids involved in baseball, everybody. The U.S. Census Bureau has released the first local level results from the 2020 census. So the big takeaways are the country is more diverse and more multiracial than ever. We will be talking about that today on the Santita Jackson Show. As expected, the FDA has authorized COVID-19 booster vaccine shots for certain immunocompromised people like transplant recipients and other medically vulnerable groups. As schools start back up and child coronaviruses cases rise, many parents and pediatricians are getting impatient for the FDA to give the green light to vaccinate children under 12. We're going to talk about that as time goes forward, everybody, as America is diversifying at the fastest rate ever. Can you believe that? Well, America is now beginning to look like the world, because most of the world is populated by people of color, everybody. Can't wait to talk about that today and how that's going to shape us politically, socially, culturally, how it's already shaping our young people. Nearly half of American workers do not earn enough to afford a one-bedroom rental. Wow. Rents in the United States continue to rise. And this is from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. This is data from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. A worker now needs to earn about $20.40 per hour to afford a modest one-bedroom rental. The median wage in the United States is about $21 an hour. But millions of Americans, from Amazon warehouse workers to cab drivers to public school teachers, are struggling to pay rent. About 14% of Americans fell behind on rent payments during the pandemic, roughly double the figure before the pandemic. And people before the pandemic were struggling to pay their rents too. So what are we going to do about that, everybody? Well, the fight for voting rights in Texas goes on. Texas law enforcement was enlisted to end the Democrats' holdout. They were enlisted law enforcement to go arrest the Democrats that they could find. And we have to tip our hat to State Senator Carol Alvarado, who did a 15-hour filibuster, the way filibusters used to occur. She was on her feet talking for 15 hours, no breaks. Well, even though she did that laudable job, on an 18 to 11 party line vote, the Senate voted to advance the measure further restricting voting rights in Texas. Now, John Lewis's family have stepped forward, and they are asking for the president and Congress in his memory to do all they can to pass the For the People Act. We saw something that we don't really see often after decades of a back and forth. Oil giant Shell has agreed to pay this African nation, Nigeria, $111 million for destruction in Nigeria. Everybody, that never happens. The Supreme Court has rejected a challenge to Indiana University's vaccine mandate. After losing 2 rounds in lower courts, a group of Indiana University students challenging the school's coronavirus vaccine were dealt a final blow Thursday as the United States Supreme Court upheld the college's vaccination requirement. We will see where that goes. We have got some good news this morning from a brilliant theologian and lawyer and educator, someone for whom I have so much admiration and respect. Indeed, she is from Rainbow Push, but she's also the pastor of the Maple Park United Methodist Church here in Chicago. Reverend Attorney Jeanette Wilson, how you doing today?
Good morning, Santita. How are you?
I am doing great. It's always wonderful to hear your voice. We need some good news in all of this as we face all this tumult every day. What's on your mind?
Well, I thought it was interesting if we read the book of Psalms. You know, that's a book of songs, and you're a singer. And so it is a book that always gives me a sense of comfort because it's like music. You have the blues, you have jazz, you have rhythm and blues, and each one soothes you at different moments. Well, this particular psalm is a lament, and it has dual meanings, but it is Psalm 22 is a psalm that records the same words that Jesus uttered while he was hanging on Calvary. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? And as we look at these times, many of us feel like we're being crucified. We're hanging on Calvary, and we're looking down at our lives and just wondering, where is God in the midst of COVID-19, Delta variant? Where is God while I've been unable to maintain a decent health status? Where is God while it seems that at this moment people are despising me, mocking me? They are planning my funeral while I'm lying here in the hospital. Where are you, God, in the midst of all of this, all of these challenges that I seem to be facing at this very moment? And, you know, Jesus gives us, I often wondered, why do we have to watch Jesus on the cross? Yeah, because of salvation. But the other thing was to let you know that God understands these moments that we feel disconnected, we feel abandoned by God, we feel that all of our faith is in vain. At this very moment, there are many people who are homeless now because of various circumstances, lost loved ones due not just to COVID, but to this unusual violence. Many people are they just stop looking at the news because they can't handle it. And, the psalmist here, it's almost as if he's prophetic, giving us, because the psalm is written certainly before the crucifixion in our chronological view of time. And it says to us, even in the midst of your crucified moment, in the midst of your Calvary moment, God is ever present. God has not forsaken you, even though you feel like it's dark at midday. Because you remember the world turned dark when Jesus was on the cross at high noon, where you're supposed to see the sun. I woke up this morning, there's no sun here because we're in the midst of a physical storm. And even in the midst of that, we must feel and reach deep within. It's the cry of a wounded spirit, but God is present. God has not left us. God has taken us through a moment. And for God, our moments are very brief, but for us, it seems like years. We've been in COVID for more than a year. It seems like an eternity, but for God, it's just a dot in the crucible of time. And so I just want us to know that there are moments where you see no hope, you see no light. You must reach inward to your faith and know that God is still present. God is holding you, carrying you, comforting you, even when you're not clear, when your mind is clouded and your eyes are dim. God is still with us, and God will bring you through this very moment.
But you know what? Not but. Even though that's what I just said. Just very quickly, how do you hold on when all of us, I've talked to so many people, Reverend Pastor Wilson, and we're all dealing with so much death, right? With a lot of people. I was talking to my mother. I said, I feel like people are parachuting out of here. And then you're dealing with sickness or the fear of sickness. There's a lot of fear out here, and I know fear is false evidence or appearing real. I get that, but when your rent is due, and when you're looking at someone who's going to evict you, when you're working hard and you cannot afford an apartment in the United States, when you're doing everything you can, what do you do?
Well, I think that's when you have to, if you don't have a faith, you have no place to turn, and you just throw your hands up and say, I give up. And even with faith, remember, God himself expressed this kind of agony. It's like Jesus hanging on Calvary for some other people who despised him, ridiculed him, laughed at him. And yet, you got to hang there. Just don't give up. Don't give out. God is present. And you have to know, if you read the whole psalm, it goes through all of this cry of agony and disbelief, confusion. At the very end, he said, yet I will serve you. And I guess it's turning inward to God that will keep you. It doesn't make that moment better, but it lets you know you're going to make it through this moment. You just have to hold on to your faith. It's a rope. Reverend Evans used to tell us, reach past your break when you're holding on to a frayed rope and yet hold on. Don't give up. Don't let go and say, I just can't make it any further. You will make it. You're going to make it, but you're going to have to hold on a little while longer. Help is on the way. For those who can't pay the rent, Congress is still in session. They're fighting. Those who have good sense are fighting. They've extended the moratorium. People are looking at options for people who are struggling. They're fighting. I look at Reverend Jackson, Reverend Barber, are continuing to fight for not just a moratorium for renters, but fighting to make sure that we change our public policies as in terms of how it deals with poor people. There are people struggling with you. You don't see them, you don't know them, but just hold on. Morning will come after the darkness, after the night. Joy will come, but it's going to be a minute. We just have to hold on to each other, hold on to knowing that you're not alone. God is with you. I've talked to people, I'm praying with people going through surgery, going through all sorts of trauma, all kinds of grief, unimaginable grief. Children dying before their parents, suddenly, children being shot, children getting COVID. I get it. You think about those hospital workers have to go and face death every single day. Not only the death of the people they see, the potential of the death may come their way because of the extreme nature of this disease, and yet they go. It keeps them moving. It keeps them knowing that I'm fighting for somebody else's life. And so I think that that Calvary moment, Jesus gave his life for our lives. And that'll keep you hanging there. If you're fighting for your child, you're fighting for your family, hold on to fight for somebody else while you're going through, because it gives you some energy, it gives you some motivation. Some days I have to get up and think of others other than myself to keep me going and keep my joy. I can't just focus on my situation, my condition. I got to think of somebody's worse than I am. So let me get my happy self up and find joy so I can go and fight for them. And I think that's what we have to look. Teachers who are getting ready to go back in these buildings, kids not vaccinated, they're not vaccinated, parents, some people don't want them to wear masks. Yet I'm called to teach. My fight is to protect and provide for those kids. And so you have to have something bigger than you that you believe in and that you're going to fight for.
And fight for infrastructure so that if children,
Yes.
if parents, for whatever reasons, want their children to learn remotely, every child who is in our school system ought to have access to Wi-Fi and a computer. I think that with Silicon
Absolutely.
Valley making more money, Reverend Wilson, they are the new billionaires on their way to becoming trillionaires. They should provide every child in the United States. I don't care where they're from or what, because when I go to another country and they have a universal single payer system, they do not charge me a dime if I get sick. What I want to do is make sure that
Get quality care.
yeah, that's right. Every child should have access to a real top line computer. And they should not have to go outside of a school as we saw this young child do, young white child, because his family, they're poor. And I'll never forget that picture last year. He was sitting outside of his school because they had Wi-Fi in school, but he couldn't go into the school, and it was not warm outside.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think there's a lot of work, everybody, that we have got to do. So there's,
And we throw away more food as Americans than many families get in a week. You can't. I was saying you can't just feed children Monday through Friday at school, even though it's not the healthiest meal. And then what are they supposed to eat on Saturday and Sunday? We have 25 or more thousand children in Chicago who are homeless. They don't know where they're going to sleep on a given day. And the schools are open. They feed them breakfast and lunch, but they don't feed them dinner, and they don't feed them on Saturday and Sunday. We have to think through. So while I'm in my Calvary moment, there's somebody else that's in a greater moment. I got to think about how can I change that policy, that practice, so that we provide for a generation whose future is being diminished by our generation's behavior and actions. People sitting in Congress, they want to go home on break, where people have no break,
not from
no
this,
opportunity.
not
No,
from
there's
this,
no
not
break.
from this.
And we say, well, I'm just so tired. I got to go home and do what? So you find your faith, and then you find you some action. You shouldn't have to beg people to volunteer. If you're not doing anything anyway, why wouldn't you volunteer at a nursing home? Volunteer at a food pantry. Volunteer at Rainbow Push. Go where people are making a difference, and you won't have time to have a pity party. Life is tough, but it gets better when you're serving.
Well, life is tough. You sound like my mom now. She was like, this is a picnic. But what you can do, she said, if you focus on someone other than yourself, you will be blessed. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
As
Thank
she
you.
would say, to quote my friend, she always tells me about the God factor.
Always.
That's what we got to focus on. The
Absolutely. That's what God will show out.
Factor.
Well, and I am respectful of people in my audience who are not believers. I appreciate that. I really, really do. And I respect that, even though we're not on the same page on that. I really, really do. But I do hope that you will find something bigger than yourself that is all good upon which you can focus. I do hope that you will as Reverend Evans would say, the rope of hope. I hope that you will hold on to that,
That's right.
because
Hold on to that rope.
these are tough times. But Reverend Dr. Robert Schuller said, tough times never last, but tough people do. So just keep that in mind. Reverend Pastor Jeanette Wilson from the Maple Park United Methodist Church and Rainbow Push. I want to thank you for that this morning, because we needed that song. We needed that lamentation. We needed that hope. Blessings to you. Sending you much love.
I thank you for always trying to lift people, and just remember, all of us are wounded healers.
Oh, trust me, I know this.
If you think about how
Oh my!
30.
I know how wounded I am, and what I'm doing is working on trying to get well every day. And this audience helps me to do that, because they force me to be bigger than
it's really
even
written
the
by
smallest parts of me. And I thank them for that. Sending you much love.
Henry
Sending you much
Nouwen
love.
called us wounded healers, but Howard Thurman gives me comfort as a wounded healer.
Absolutely. Amen. Love you. Love you, Jeanette
right.
Wilson.
Love you.
Everybody stay right here. Let's talk about our health on the Santita Jackson Show and the census. What is your reaction, everybody? More of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Okay, Paul, were we able to get her?
I will try her right now.
Okay, thank you. Stanley Davis, he said the world is very, very dark. And you know that this is going to get worse before the dawn of better. That's true. That's true. But I think we can get better as things get worse. That's the upside. Because we cannot act as if pre COVID, the world was in a welcoming place for most people. It just wasn't. It wasn't. We were not in the best place. No person on earth should be living in poverty. Most people on earth do. Most people on earth cannot afford the basics. No, God will supply our every need, not our every greed. And some people, too few people own too much, and too many people own nothing at all. We've got to do better than that. Not just better, we have to do right. And I don't think things are going to get right until we do right. How about that? So let's talk about getting healthy, but also let's talk about the census. Okay, what do you make of those numbers? And what about the blurred lines in the numbers? Dr. Deborah Holden, how you doing?
Hey, I was having a little technical difficulty.
No, sounds much better today.
Okay, great.
I don't know what phone you're using, but it's great to hear your voice.
I heard Reverend Wilson. Is she still on?
Oh, I think she left us. I kept her on for a little while.
Okay.
but you can always call her. Always.
No, we had this really great sort of press conference yesterday.
Oh, really?
Talking about about school reopening and kids going back to school. And your governor issued a statewide mask mandate for all K through 12 kids.
Mm-hmm.
I will do some searching, but I don't know if any others who've done that.
Well, you know what? I think that, when we're looking at this whole mask fight and even the fight about vaccines, I think that one of the things that we're doing in this conversation is we're selling the conversation short, because we're demonizing people. Quite frankly, there's demonization on both sides. But certainly in the mainstream media, we're demonizing people who are fighting masks, who are fighting mandatory vaccines and all of that. I think, there's a real religious component to this. And, one thing I don't do is mess with people on their religion. I do not do that. That's a real part of this issue for people. And we've got to have some discussions about that with the understanding of the context in which people make the decisions that they make. I had a my locker mate in high school was a Jehovah's Witness. And I thank God for Susan Houston every day. I can't believe I called her name. It's been 40 years. And said, about her religion. And she was very patient, and she was just the best locker mate girl. She was clean, lovely, she was wonderful, and just a wonderful person. And she explained to me about, as a Jehovah's Witness, what their thoughts about blood transfusions and all of that. And it's easy to ridicule someone until you get to know some. It's really easy to ridicule a group until you get to know someone in the group.
10 seconds.
Right. And getting to know her and hearing her, and she wasn't the first Jehovah's Witness I'd ever met, but it was quite an education for me. Quite an education.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to Jackson. Hear your voices today, as I've been hearing them all week, and thank you so much for calling in. 773-763-9278, 763-763-9278, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio in Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota. We got Dr. Deborah Holden here, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University, brilliant epidemiologist. Yesterday, as we were talking about how to increase our health, how to boost our immune systems, Kenneth, I hear you. So many of you have been talking about that on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Let's talk about that today. Because I think it's important for us to look at what we can do in the midst of this pandemic, because we just got word from a study that the Pfizer vaccine, I guess after a few months, there was a 42% effectiveness. Okay. The numbers were surprising to all of us, but if you listen to Dr. Deborah Verhoeven, she said over time, the effectiveness of the vaccines waned. Now, maybe they have waned faster than we thought, but that has happened. We see that Israel, which is 80% vaccinated, according to this Wall Street Journal report, most of the people who are hospitalized in Israel, well, they've been vaccinated. So there's something going on here with the different variants, with the vaccines. At the base, because the vaccines, people need to know what your comorbidities are, because you're more vulnerable there with COVID-19. We have to get our health together. And that is something that you have been pushing, Dr. Verhoeven, since the beginning. You said, all this is great. It's just like if you've got your face full of pimples and whatnot, you can put as much makeup on it as you want to. It's not going to work out right, everybody. So give yourself a fighting chance. Let's do whatever we can to take care of ourselves, to get our tests and all of that. I cede the floor to you, Dr. Deborah Verhoeven, because I told you I'm very, very sensitive to the fact that I lost a woman who's like a sister to me. She had a heart attack in the middle of the night. And one wonders if we had not been in the pandemic, if she'd been able to have her annual physical, which she was not able to have yet, right? You have a lot of people who have cancers that have gone undiagnosed and therefore untreated. There's a lot going on here. Where do you want to begin?
Where do we begin? There's a lot that's happening. What it really does, right? I love this idea of, revisiting what people can do to be healthy, because the thing that I think we want to focus on is prevention. And that's prevention all the way around. That's preventing yourself from contracting COVID in the first place. And then it's preventing yourself from having severe symptoms if you do contract COVID. I've made it no secret. I've been vaccinated. That wasn't a decision that I came to lightly. I waited out. I told everybody, honestly, when the vaccine first came out, I was a no thank you. Most of the people that I know were a no thank you. My daughter at the time was working in a hospital. She was a no thank you. And they were surveyed before the vaccine even came out so that they could, gauge, interest from people in the hospital. And I think in her hospital, it was like 30-something% of the workers that they surveyed said that they would get it if it was available. And that turned out to be about the percentage of people who got it once it became available. So I think, knowing that, right, and appreciating that for some people, and I went through my own process of weighing out the options and the risks and the benefits. And, I looked at a lot of data, and I talked to a lot of, other professionals and experts, including Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett herself, the woman who developed the mRNA technology that's used and the candidate vaccine that was used in the Moderna trials and subsequent vaccines. And I made the choice to get vaccinated. So now when we fast forward to where we are in the pandemic currently, I don't go. I have my grandchild doing 11 days now. 11 days. I had a very good friend who had a pretty, I would say probably moderate-sized event indoors yesterday. I really adore this person. I said, I really adore you. I hope that you have a great time, but I will not be there. He said, wow. I said, I'm 11 days from my daughter being due. If I contract COVID, I will have to be in quarantine. And who's going to be with her in the delivery room? And he looked at me and he said, why did we get vaccinated? And I said, I got vaccinated because I wanted the protection that the vaccine does provide. But we now know that protection is not whole and complete and 100%. And we're learning if, over time. I got vaccinated in February. I got vaccinated in February. That is, now we're understanding potentially a forever ago.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I still practice my prevention. I don't go to large indoor gatherings. I don't hang out around a whole lot of people. I still practice good hand hygiene. And when I'm out in public, indoors, I still wear my mask. And then I take all the other steps in my life. I'm much more regimented with taking my vitamins. I'm eating more mindfully. I make it a point to move my arms and legs every day. I don't encourage people because there's a lot of sort of, I would call them alternative, but, what we call alternative in other cultures and for other people, this is just, how they eat. But I have a cousin who had cancer and he became the sea moss king. Now, can I advertise sea moss? Do I have any expertise to tell people to take sea moss? No, I do not. And I will not tell people that because I don't have that expertise. But I take it. And it sure enough gave me a lot more energy and, just kind of smooth things out for me, my skin included. And so, my recommendation to people is take the reins of your own health. We spend a lot of time talking about this vaccine, talking about masking. People spend a lot of time arguing with their friends and their coworkers and their neighbors about should we do this, should we have mask mandates, should the kids go back to school, but and at the same time, have the women had their mammograms? Have the men had their prostate exam? Have people over 45 gotten their colonoscopy? They lowered the age for colonoscopy screening, especially if you have a family history of colon cancer to 45. That happened during COVID, and I don't think most people caught that. They say we had an increase in breast cancer incidents, new cases in African-American women this year. And I'm like, that's an artifact of so much breast cancer screening that didn't happen last year. So these are new cases. These are just cases that were detected much later than normal because of all of the lapses in primary and preventive care. This is the time to do that. And what I also encourage people is I'm really, really saddened about some of the return to school strategies, which in many places don't appear to be really strategies at all. They're just rolling the dice. And in our county, in our state, I think the number was 380 kids have died from the Delta variant. Children. in the state of Michigan. I'm like, what? You know, and here they are, they're sending kids back to school. Your governor took a bold move. Your governor said all kids K through 12 will be masked. We don't have that here. I thought we was doing something because they required masking for kids K through 6. And I asked our health officer why, and this came from the health officer. And she said because they're not eligible to be vaccinated. And I thought, well, that's strange because among the 12 to 17-year-olds, the numbers I think are on the order of about 25%. So only a quarter of them. And now we know even if you're vaccinated, you could potentially spread it, especially Delta, because it kind of hangs around in the nose and mouth longer, and you can still breathe it in and breathe it out on somebody. And you're more likely to be a breakthrough case if you contract the Delta variant. So it's just a lack of attention to public health. And what I hope people remember is that they're keeping count. They're keeping count in their county. They're keeping count in their state. And they're going to hold these elected officials who aren't putting the basic policies in place to protect people, especially the most vulnerable, children, prisoners, and the like. I hope they're keeping count because, in my opinion, those lives will be on their hands. For the governors and the county executives who, return to normal, the people in Florida, the leaders in Florida who, literally have caused surges in different parts of the country by just having no requirements, no nothing. You don't have to mask indoors. You don't have to, just free for all.
But you know what? I think that when we look at Florida, well, that's true. But I think that what we have to do is also look at the culture. That's one of the things that we're missing here. How much of the thinking is driven by religious dogma. I'm not going to argue with anyone about their religious thoughts. I'm not, because I respect that. Even when I disagree, please, I have disagreements within my own, denomination. But I'm open to growing. What is interesting about what they're doing in Florida, as Governor Pritzker has mandated masks for our children who are in school, Governor DeSantis has opened the door to antibody treatments, which too few of us have access to. So because as equity is like a cornerstone of your work. I certainly believe that people need to have equal access to the vaccines. I think that people need to have equal access to insulin also, okay? Because that's a real issue. People are rationing their insulin now, and now they're going back to taking dog insulin because they don't have access to insulin. It's too expensive for them. Shameful. That's happening too. But having access to the therapeutics, Dr. Deborah Verholden, to me is something that I think we're not spending enough time on that. Not to mention that having the discussion about what we can do to boost our immune systems. Can you speak to that first? Having access to treatments once you do get COVID, and when you're eligible for treatments, when you should seek a treatment, because therapeutics do exist.
Yeah. Well, we saw earlier in the pandemic the tremendous inequity in who got what. When hospitals were rationing beds, rationing ventilators, some people were put in a room, some people died on gurneys in hallways. So we know that these inequities and differences in who gets what and how people get treated both predated COVID and have been on loudspeaker during COVID. When it comes to the therapeutics, we're not in a space now of rationing these things. And when you talk about the monoclonal antibody treatment, there are so many people who contracted COVID and recovered. And people always want to argue with me over this and say, why should we bother being vaccinated against something that has such a low death rate? And it's always an interesting question for me, because if it's your dad, if it's your mom, if it's your child, you would see it differently. you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we can prevent those deaths, why wouldn't we prevent, you know? And so it's.
Oh, Dr. Deb, we lost you for a second. And she was
Sorry,
talking.
I hit the mute button by accident.
Okay.
I think it's important that people understand what treatments are available, and that there be a demand for those treatments, and that the loved ones be a demand for those treatments. Remember, a lot of times when people are being hospitalized, oftentimes they are not the best advocates for themselves because they're sick. You know, and the last thing I'll say about that is we need data. We need the data on who's getting what. We have to be able to understand and confront the disparities that we're seeing in care. And people have to be held to account for that. You know, it should be illegal to have these tremendous disparities in healthcare and healthcare access. You know, we had a program in Michigan launched through this Medicaid equity project. Well, what they did was they said, okay, Medicaid providers, they have what's called enhanced dish payments. So you take on X number of Medicaid patients, you know, provide them care in your hospital system or in your practice, and et cetera. And you get incentive payments and these bonus payments at the end of the year. And it's based on, it used to be based on how many people you serve. Now it's got some quality indicators associated with it. Not only is it just serving people, but it's also demonstrating certain results, right? So you know, might have to, I'm just going to make one up. You might have to prove that, you know, you made the 20% improvement in A1C in your diabetic patients. You know, so it's not, it goes from not just serving people, but some indicator that what you're giving them is making a difference. Then they took it to another level. And they started to look, and I'll give you an example right out of my world. I've come out of behavioral health. You know, I did a lot of work in the substance abuse space. So one of the sort of evidence-based practices for substance abuse is starting people on medication-assisted treatment in the emergency department. So somebody comes to the emergency department and has had an overdose. It's like this critical moment where, you know, people have had these experiences, they're very scary experiences, and it is also an opportunity to get people to consider some type of treatment for their addiction. And the thinking is no wrong door. If you can get somebody into a system of care, you should provide them care as soon as they come in the door. And so they start people on medication-assisted treatment and replacement therapy to help them deal with the withdrawal that comes with suddenly stopping opioids if you're a, you know, patterned opioid user. And it helps to deal with some of the other symptoms and side effects of you know, just cold turkey. And so we looked at the data, and what we found was there was nearly, depending on where you were, up to 200% difference in who was getting started on medication-assisted treatment in the ED. This is an entire Medicaid population now. So we're not talking about some people have private insurance and some people have this is a whole Medicaid population, which has these income requirements, right? You got to be below a certain income to have Medicaid. And the strongest predictor of who got started on medication-assisted treatment was race. If you were white, you were just twice as likely to be offered the opportunity than if you were black.
Well, see, but
how is it that we take this evidence-based practice, you know, that the Fed have rolled out a lot of money for? You know, HHS, Department of Health and Human Services, declared an opioid epidemic in 2017 and then rolled out billions of dollars to help combat the epidemic. And from 19 to 20, from 17 to 18, the year that followed, we saw our first decrease in opioid overdose deaths. But the decrease was only for non-Hispanic whites.
But see, but that's why
Americans and Hispanics had an increase.
But see, but that's why it's important to me when I look at who who Governor DeSantis, the base of his support, the fact that he's offering therapeutics is very interesting to me. When I know people are when they ask for therapeutics, when they've been diagnosed or a loved one has been diagnosed as having COVID-19, I'm seeing the same things anecdotally. I've done no study, just anecdotally. I'm seeing the same things I saw last year when Black people and brown people tried to get tested. They get pushback.
Yes.
They get told to go home and ride COVID. I mean, and I'm like, wait a minute, ride it out when, please, you've got antibody treatments. I saw that in a post from Dr. Shanina Knighton. She said, ask your healthcare provider about antibody treatments. I said, okay. Look, we're focused on the vaccine, and we ought to be, but as you said, it's a Swiss cheese approach. That's a layer of protection, but there are many layers that you need. Once you get COVID, what are you supposed to do? 80% of Israel is vaccinated. Most of the people who are in the hospital over there got the vaccine. Not to mention the fact, and I want you to speak to this. I've got about 4 minutes left, and you speak to it, literally. We have 919,000 plus beds in the United States, hospital beds, for 330 million people. Does that make sense to you?
Well, the need for a hospital bed should not be a common need, right? We wouldn't require a hospital bed for even 20% of our population or any sizable number, because the goal is to stop, to do the work to prevent people from going to the hospital in the first place. Hospital-based care is the most expensive care there is, and if you were sick, you would want it because you'd want to be where you were going to be, taken care of. But I, for example, much rather manage illness at home.
Me too.
But not if it's severe illness.
Me too, but I'm thinking, right?
Monitor.
Just having access. I just found it odd. I thought that was just a surprisingly low number for so many
here's
people.
What I tell you: if we had more hospital beds, our healthcare would likely cost a lot more. See, this was the problem that we had during COVID. Hospitals don't typically operate, at or above capacity. On a normal day, with all things regular, hospitals are not exceeding demand. They're not.
Sure.
We sort of have what we need, right? We hit that sweet spot. The problem is in the midst of this crisis, and so many people requiring hospitalization, we just simply overwhelmed the system that we had. And unfortunately, a lot of hospitals closed, many of them being smaller and rural hospitals. But if those hospitals were operating at a much larger capacity with many more beds, it would be hard for them to maintain that in a time of non-crisis, if that makes sense. So I know the number does seem really low.
Yeah.
Because the goal is to prevent people from needing a hospital bed and to reserve hospital beds for the people who are the sickest.
Well,
or have something requiring a hospital stay.
I've wanted to ask you that because it really, it was troubling to me, because also I think we need to, in this moment, rethink, not reimagine, but rethink healthcare delivery, prevention, all of that. We need to redo this, because I think as Reverend Tisha Williams said, COVID's been the snitch. It's told on us. It's revealed our vulnerabilities. It's revealed not just our vulnerabilities, but the things we've just flat out been doing wrong. I've got 1 minute. It belongs to you. Dr. Deborah Holden, can you speak to us as we're about to go into the weekend? It's summertime. People want to be out, and we are. What do you want us to do this weekend?
You know what, people should be out. Be out, get some sun, interact with folks. We just asking people to do it in a way that honors the fact that we're still in a pandemic. People have talked about, said we're coming out of this, or we're out of this, or, last summer people were saying we're in the middle of this. We ain't in the middle of nothing. We just in it. So, right? Like, remember last time people were like, we in the middle of a pandemic. We in the middle of the pandemic. No, we're not in the middle of it. We are just in it. Because if we was in the middle of it, it should have been over and done with by the end of last year.
How about that?
We might be in the midst of it, you know. So I just remind people that we are still in a pandemic, and the prevention is not just about you; it's also about others. I don't think anybody the same way most of us don't
1 minute
walk around with a gun in our person, shoot somebody for taking our parking space or cutting us off in line or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have a general respect for our own freedom and well-being and all of that, and generally some degree of, appreciation or respect for others. We really need to have that heightened right now. And people can be out, but like I say, I personally don't do large.
30.
Sure.
Why? It just seems like a preventable, avoidable situation to greatly reduce the chances that I would contract COVID. And I'm vaccinated,
but
I still don't.
15.
And that's the final word. Everybody just be careful. Please be careful. Just as careful as you were last year this time. Well, as we tried to be, some of that was driven by fear. Most of it was. You're more empowered now. We know much more about this. Please, please take care of yourselves. We love you, Dr. Deborah Verhoeven. 11 days away from becoming glamour. U.S. The Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a few minutes. Dr. Deborah?
Yes, ma'am.
Whatever phone you're using, that's great.
Okay.
Is that your landline?
No, I know what actually it is. It's the headset. I have two pair of AirPods, and I've figured it out. If I'm using one pair, I sound bad. If I'm using this pair, I sound good.
Okay. That's because it's made a huge difference. Huge. I'm glad we caught it. See, these are the happy accidents. Yay! But I'll call you a little bit later. Do you want to stick around? We're talking about this U.S. Census. Dr. Deb? Ooh.
I will stick around for about 15 minutes if that's okay for you, just listening.
Of course. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to send you this story about children born during the pandemic having lower IQs, according to this U.S. study. I'd like you to look into that. Yeah. It came out of Brown.
All right, we have David Daly.
Thank you. I didn't want to just throw it out there. I want to send it to you so you can take a look at it and let me know what your thoughts are. David Daly?
Good morning, my friend.
How are you, my dear friend?
Hanging in.
Wonderful. I've got Dr. Deborah Verhoeven, who's going to stay with us for just a few minutes. She wants to hear what you've got to say about this census.
Excellent. Good morning.
Oh boy, we love her. She's a brilliant epidemiologist. She comes out of Johns Hopkins, but she's been brought to Michigan State University to help construct their School of Public Health. So she's their associate dean for the School of Public Health. And so this is David Daly, who wrote the book.
Busy job right now.
Oh, that's right. Oh God, there's so much she's doing. Bestseller. Why Your Vote Doesn't Count. You have gotten she buys books by the bundle. You need to get this one and send it.
Piece of rat ass on my counter. Last year, he spoke on something, and I was like, I got to get his book. I bought 5.
Oh, I love it. Oh, yeah. That's right. Everybody, you know what? Think about that, please. The clicking in my microphone is obscuring my voice. Okay.
We have Mr. McKee.
Okay, did you hear that? Linda said that the clicking in my microphone is obscuring my voice at times badly. Is it during the show, Linda? Let me know. Is it during the show? Is it happening now? Let me know. I want to see what you're thinking. Dwight McKee?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, we've got Dave Daly here. Speak, Dwight. I want to make sure that your line is clear.
How you doing, Dave?
Keep talking, Dwight, please.
How you doing, Dave? How you doing?
Okay, Dwight, can you move around just a little bit?
How is that?
That's a little bit better. Keep talking, Dwight. We're trying to get it so that we don't lose you during the show.
Oh, okay. 47 years ago, our forefathers brought on this time a new nation.
Do you have a stronger spot in your place?
No, not that I know about. How's this?
Keep talking.
Yeah. Conceived in liberty and dedicated to the
Where you are is right where you need to be.
Now, under the great Civil War, testing with that nation.
Okay. Do we have Attorney Hoffler and Aaron, Attorneys Hoffler and Kyle?
I'm still trying to reach them.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. But I know Dave Daly can only be with us till the bottom of the hour, but I thought it would be interesting to have you react to these census numbers, which makes, America begin to look like the world, David Daly and Dwight McKee.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that what you're seeing here is really what I expect is that white voters, white Americans are going to take a look at these numbers, recognize that they have to share power and find compromise and work together towards consensus and coalitions. I'm sorry, did I say something funny?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
No. Hell out of the vote and gerrymander everywhere and going to double down on all of this. Come on.
Hello? Like what? Oh man! I said, well, maybe it's me. I don't know, huh? Oh man, that was rich. What kind of utopian?
Everybody, but Attorney Hoffler just needs about a minute.
I don't know. I mean, I've read my history. I mean, maybe you're reading like a little more like critical race theory or something, which I think tells a different story of American history, and really one that hates our country. And I prefer to look at sort of the unending march of progress that we have seen.
You know what? Help this man, Lord.
I'm punch drunk.
We're going to get there, David. What did you say? He said,
Sure we are. Run away.
We are.
He's trying to sound like Gary.
Oh man, bless your heart. Paul, do you have any idea what that is about? It's not happening now. It's happening intermittently. Okay. It's happening now. Okay, Paul, if you can look into this, because they're saying on Facebook, and it could be a Facebook issue, but I don't control that here. That they're getting clicking and distortion.
Okay.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. If you want to text me at that number, GWC Injury Lawyers gives me the opportunity to do that. But I want to hear your voices today. What is your reaction to the news that America is diversifying at a rate that we've never seen before, that for the first time since 1790, when we started taking the census, whites have contracted in population. Their numbers are dropping. But Asians and Hispanics are growing. Black people appear to have flatlined, but is that the real story? Because with Hispanic is not a color, it's a culture, right? So you have Black people who are in the Hispanic world, and you have white ones too. So what are the real numbers? And how, and now that we have multiracial categories, you have many Black people who now classify themselves in a multitude of ways, which in our history we've never been able to do. The one drop rule has always applied. So I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts. Whatever it is, America's beginning to look like the world, which is a rainbow. So 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278 is the number, and I want to hear from you. Everybody, please, 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 please call me or text me at that number and go to the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook and my YouTube channel, The Santita Jackson Show. You know, maybe you need to bring the volume down just a bit, Paul, because they're saying that I'm hearing a lot of discussion about clipping intermittently. Maybe you need to bring me down just a little bit. Everybody, I want to hear your thoughts about the census. Let's get to a couple of these headlines so that we can get into this discussion. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 78 degrees. Thank goodness it is cooled off, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 80 degrees, mostly sunny. The Dow closed up 14 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed up 51 points, and the S&P 500 closed up 13 points, breaking records, everybody. The Cubs were, they might as well have been shut out by the Brewers. The Brewers 17, the Cubs 4. They haven't been faring too well since they made those big trades. And the Field of Dreams game, oh my goodness, the first time in the history of Major League Baseball, a game was played in Iowa. And it was taken from the page of that iconic movie by Kevin Costner, The Field of Dreams. Of course, he walked through the field onto the baseball field. Oh, how wonderful was it? It was just a moment, a cinematic moment in real life. The White Sox were triumphant, but it was not around, everybody. The White Sox 9, the Yankees 8. It was a fight to the finish. What a magnificent game. Can't wait to see more like that, everybody. The Supreme Court will not block Indiana University's vaccine mandate as Justice Barrett rejects the students' pleas. Everybody, after losing 2 rounds in lower federal courts, a group of Indiana University students challenging the school's coronavirus vaccine mandate were dealt a final blow on Thursday as the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the college's vaccination requirement. What do you think about that, everybody? I want to hear your thoughts about that too. And guess what? They're closer to having even more voter restrictions in Texas. We have had Texas on this show over the past few days talking about the filibuster from State Senator Alvarado. She put forth a magnificent fight on her feet for 15 hours, everybody, no breaks, trying to stem the tide of restrictions, further restrictions on voter rights. Well, she led a valiant fight, but ultimately 18-11 in the Senate. That has been passed. So we will see as the Republicans have now ordered that these Democrats who have not shown up for the House, that they be arrested and brought in. In the meantime, 51% of Americans, according to a poll from Data for Progress, Equal Citizens and End Citizens United and other progressive groups, they found that 51% of America's voters, 74% of Democrats, 42% of independents, and 30% of Republicans would be more likely to support Biden if he is able to convince the Senate to pass the For the People Act. John Lewis's family have asked that in his memory, the For the People Act be passed. He's been gone just over a year. Can we do it? Of course we can, everybody. Of course we can. Now, something interesting is happening, something we don't really see. You know, we go into a lot of third world countries and we have a lot of environmental accidents. We just leave a lot of environmental waste and we don't pay the price. Well, after decades, it turned protests and demands about the damage that has been done in Nigeria. Royal Dutch Shell on Wednesday finally agreed to pay $111 million for oil spills that have polluted Nigerian communities for more than half a century. Good for them. Let's get to the census, everybody. What do you think about the news that America is now diversifying at a faster clip than it has ever diversified? in the United States, in the history of our country. Since 1790, when we've been taking census, uh, whites have been in the majority, the overwhelming majority, except in the slave states. At one point, nearly 60% of Mississippi, for example, during slavery, was black, was majority black. So, what has happened? Now, 12% of the United States is black, 18% is Hispanic. We've seen the Asians almost double in their presence in the United States. And white numbers for the first time have contracted. What do what does all this mean culturally? What does it mean? Uh, what does it mean for whites to more and more? But what does it mean for America? More and more whites to be figuring as a factor, less and less in terms of numbers. What does it mean for America to become a majority minority country? Is it even proper to talk about America being a minority country? Because guess what? In the world today, 43% of the world is Asian. 38%, 39%, excuse me, is African. That's right. And guess what the percentage is for Europe? 5.8%. So have we really been looking at this the right way anyway? So let's talk about this. We've got a tremendous panel who are joining us today. We've got attorney C.K. Hoffler, outgoing president of the National Bar Association, chair of Rainbow Push, brilliant lawyer. Aaron Connolly, one of the country's leading political strategists from Covenant Strategies. We've got Dwight McKee, Dr. D, brilliant sociologist, and we have Dave Daly, the author of Rat Effed and Unrigged. Rat Effed, Why Your Vote Doesn't Count. Get that New York Times bestseller. You don't want to miss it. Buy it in a bundle, everybody, and give it to people so you can understand why we are where we are right now politically. And Unrigged, how we are battling back, how Americans are battling back to save our democracy. In the interest of time, David Daly, why don't you help us out? Because I know that you've got to go. What do you make of these numbers? Were you surprised to find that America is increasingly a rainbow nation?
These are fascinating numbers. Really, what they show is that rural America is shrinking. Small state America is either not growing or shrinking. The smallest counties across the country are shrinking. The biggest cities are getting bigger, and that the population growth is being fueled by Latino growth and Asian growth. And so this data doesn't just provide a snapshot of America. It's also the starting gun for redistricting, which is how political power gets redistributed. Every 10 years after the census, you've got to have state legislative and congressional districts of equal size. So this data kicks off the process of redrawing maps. And so the question now becomes, as the country is changing, does political power change with it? Because these groups that are ascending demographically tend to trend blue. But they are moving into states where Republicans control the process of redistricting. Texas, North Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Arizona. These are states that are growing, that in many cases are going to see additional congressional seats, not in all of those states, but in many of them. And yet those lines are going to be drawn by the Republican Party. So can they, as they did 10 years ago, use redistricting and gerrymandering to try to defy the demographic trends, to pack and crack those Democratic voters so that even though they're in the majority, they can't take a majority of seats and hold political power. And I think that is what is so interesting and also so dangerous about this moment, is that the parts of the country that are shrinking, rural America, white America, conservative small state America, hold an outsized grip on political power. And they are showing no willingness to give that power up or to share it. Instead, they're doubling down either on redistricting or on voter suppression methods. It's no mistake, right, that the states where we are seeing the greatest restrictions being enacted are these states like Texas, like Georgia, like Arizona, like Florida, that are changing, that are competitive, and where these efforts are part of what has been a long-standing American tradition of using electoral rules to hold on to power by white America.
Wow. America. Well, I mean, do you think it's appropriate to talk about being a majority, what is it, majority minority straight, majority, which I think that's odd. You know, my brother was interviewed for years ago, and my mother ended the interview because this was 40 years ago or so. It's when she was told by the headmaster, you know, and they were very excited and very gracious because they were glad to have Reverend Jackson's wife and son there, right? And some black people there. Said, you know, he is going to learn how to learn how to function as a minority in this world. And my mother said, no, he will not, because most people in the world look like him. So, and she ended the interview, and that was it. And went to the car and left. You know, I mean, because most of the world, as you can see, it's 43% Asian, it's 39% African, it's 5.8% European, David. I mean, and I'm not saying that anyone should gangster anyone else, but I'm just saying it's just a lopsided view of the world.
You're absolutely right. And what you are seeing now is that Georgia and Florida and, you know, many other states are on the tipping point of that same demographic reality of sort of mirroring the rest of the world. And so I think what we're facing here is a political reckoning of sort of how power shifts. And what we're seeing is that Republicans in these states are using every tool at their disposal to try to hold back demographic waves and to maintain a grip on power. Texas gained 4 seats in Congress in 2011. And that growth, again, was really driven by Latino voters in the Houston and Dallas areas. Republicans managed to draw a map that created exactly 0 new Latino opportunity districts, and in fact eliminated one that had existed in the previous decade's map. And so when half of the political growth in Texas is fueled by Hispanics, when about 54% of the new population in Florida is driven by Latinos, when 35% of the population growth in North Carolina is, and only about 5% of the growth there is in white voters. What does that look like as these new state legislative and congressional districts are drawn? Because it's not going to be the Democratic Party or the advocacy groups for these organizations that are in charge of the process. It's going to be Republicans in charge of the process who have already demonstrated over the course of the last decade that they will do anything it takes to draw lines and pass laws that keep themselves in power.
You know, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, how do you read this? You spent a lot of time living outside of the United States and working outside of the United States. And we're seeing some very interesting numbers. For the first time since we've been doing the census since 1790, white numbers dropped. We've seen a real explosion, as has been described, of the Hispanic population. But Hispanic is not a color, it's a culture. And we're seeing surprisingly low numbers for many people of Black people. But I'm wondering, when you now have multiracial categories, what that means. You're seeing the Asian population almost double. America's demographics are shifting. How will that shape us?
Well, good morning, Santita and everyone. You know what? This is, for me, is predictable. It's something that I expected would happen for actually a couple of decades, because in traveling the world, and I used to travel the world extensively as a lawyer, I did see the shifting demographics, and I saw resistance in other countries. And then ultimately just a recognition that this is what it is. If we look at Canada to the north, we look at the European countries and countries such as, Great Britain, France, Portugal, Spain, we're seeing all these shifting numbers, and many, many other countries on the continent, and even the former Soviet bloc countries that have, since the disbanding of the Soviet Union. Even in those countries, you're seeing changing demographics just throughout the world. But I think what is more disturbing here is the nexus between the changing demographics and enhanced voter suppression, enhanced insensitivity to homeless populations, enhanced insensitivity to appropriate representation of those groups. We have to embrace what is in this country, not try to make what is not. And so I do believe that there's a direct correlation between voter suppression, I think, just as David was saying, in states where you see heightened numbers or heightened or oppressive legislation, the worst, you see heightened numbers of groups that are minority groups that are growing by the second, by the minute. Voter suppression is an effort to suppress that vote, suppress those numbers, and the voter suppression tactics are geared towards minority communities, these Black and brown communities that are growing. As it relates to the Black demographics, the African-American demographics, and how those numbers are flatlining, I believe that is due to the fact that we, on the form, like when you fill out the census form, there are different options that you can pursue. And as you said, if you are Latino or Latina, that is a cultural identification. And so if you check, you do have an option of saying African American, not Latino, but I don't know if it's very clear that people can identify as Afro-Latino, Afro-Latina. And if they have that choice, they're probably going to say Hispanic or Latino, whatever the designation is. Whereas there are huge populations of Black, Latinos, and Latinas in this country and throughout the world that may not always be reflected. And so I think that may account for it. The same thing with, Asian Americans. We know that the number of Asian Americans is growing tremendously throughout this country, actually throughout the world. And I think now, again, there's a blending of cultures in this country. Some people may, if you are Afro-Asian, do you identify as Asian? Do you identify as African-American? So I do think the flatlining of African-Americans may not be an actual number. And then let's just put this third thing out there. People who participate in the census. We know from the push in our community, there was a need for a push because we had record low numbers of participation in the census. Well, if you don't participate in the census, you're not counted. If you're not counted, that impacts everything from federal funding to what your community will be considered on just these types of issues. So I think that that number is perhaps not an accurate number, but I don't have any statistical, and I just have research that I've done, articles that I've read, but I don't have any concrete statistical evidence of that, because that's not my area of expertise. But I do know last year when I was, over the past year, during my bar year as president of the National Bar Association, I did impanel. We had a team that looked at and was very engaged in the census, in these statistics. And it was our sense that we were underrepresented in terms of the participation. Of course, that's going to cause the numbers to be completely inaccurate.
What are your thoughts, everybody? Renee, you're chatting up a storm over here. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. What are your thoughts about the numbers? How will this shape America? How will this shape the conversation? And even though people might call themselves one thing or another, how does it shape their politics? I mean, you have many Blacks in the Hispanic community who They look black to me and look black to other black Americans, but they don't identify as black people. And I'm not slamming anyone. It's just, in America, we've had the one drop rule. So that really put black people in the position, even if you were like Walter White, the former head of the NAACP, who was really 132nd black, it made him a black man. And he helped to usher black people into one of the most glorious periods of enfranchisement that we ever experienced. But as you're right, Renee, I don't want to speak for you. I want you to call us at 773-763-9278. What does that mean? What does it mean to see a growing Asian presence that begins to reflect what's happening in the world? What does it mean to have a growing Hispanic presence? What does it mean to have white numbers begin to fall? What does it mean? What does it mean? It means it's beginning to look like the world, everybody. But I want to hear your thoughts on the Santita Jackson Show. 773-763-9278. My dear friend and brother beloved, sending you much love, David Daly. Thank you for being with us today. Cannot wait to have you back on the show next week. More of the Santita Jackson Show, our take on the census, in just a few minutes.
Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing for all of the people.
Okay. David, thank you so much. And thank you for that good laugh you gave us at the beginning. I just love that guy. Oh, my goodness. Okay, Paul. Apparently, when you brought me down, that made a difference. But I think I'm having some trouble with the cord for the mic.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like to me too.
Okay, can you say something? I'm going to send an email to that effect. But if you would say something about that,
Absolutely.
because
Yeah.
across all platforms, they're complaining about it.
Okay.
Certainly pointing it out. Okay, Philip, you said the one drop rule isn't being applied for the census anymore to reduce the black total. Hey, call in. And what's interesting is CK and Aaron and Dwight. There's a new poll that shows that black people prefer to be called black over African American. And Hispanics aren't keen to be called Latinx. This is according to the Moxie Exchange, a training and mentoring group aimed at helping businesses develop talent and create inclusive workspaces. Something to think about, everybody, something to think about. But I think it's because we now have a lot of multiracial black people in who are high profile. And there's just a lot. So I want you to call in, Renee. Renee, I don't want to speak for you, but I have noticed they are driving the truth that they are driving the truth that Frederick Douglass's father was a white man, but he was probably the product of rape, as so many of our foreparents were. Booker T. Washington had a white father as well. It's always a white father and a black mom. So that's part of not just black history, that's America's history. And we have to talk about it. And you have many indigenous people who just started passing into the white world, and that's where they are. There's a lot. In America, we're a whole lot of things, everybody. We're a whole lot of things. We need to talk about that today. Okay, it's clear on the radio. Isn't that interesting? But it's also an issue, Lorraine. It's an issue not just on Facebook. It's an issue on, they were saying, on YouTube. So that somehow or another, this is there might be the cord or something. It's something that's not working for people and their viewing and listening pleasure. And in radio now, we not only are an auditory medium, we're a visual one as well. So let me hear you, Dwight.
Hello.
Okay, wherever you are, you sound great. Aaron? Aaron Connolly? Okay, is Aaron there? Paul, is Aaron there?
She just dropped.
Okay, thank you. Please, that's right. Please get her back. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Get Attorney Connolly back.
Back in 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. Let me know when we get Aaron back. I'll come to you, Dwight, and then I'm going to go to Aaron. Everybody like and share. Robin, like and share. Good seeing you today. Philip, like and share. L. Stanley Davis, everybody like and share this show. Like and share, like and share. Renee, call in because you're asking some really, really profound questions. 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear you all articulate them. Because while it's hard to read and listen to everybody. Okay, thank you.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. U.S. Census data shows that the number of white people in the United States fell for the first time since the census was taken in 1790. It shows that Hispanics have grown tremendously. 18%, blacks 12%, Asians have doubled their numbers. But is that the whole story? And the story that we're being presented, what does it mean? What does it all mean? We've got attorney C.K. Hoffley. We're getting back attorney Aaron Connolly, and we've got we've got Dwight McKee, Dr. D. Thank you, David Daly, for having been with us in the previous segment. Dwight McKee, what do you make of these numbers? What do you make of the multiracial categories and all of that? How do you take all of this?
Well, I think, as strange as it sounds, and I know this is going to sound very strange, I think what you're going to see in the next 30 to 40 years is a reconfiguration of the country. I think they're going to really find this to be more the North American Commonwealth, where there is a blending of United States and Canada to balance that. And it will become, United States and Canada will become almost one country, and there will be an overlay of political and economic proximity and integration so that they can have this as a majority, much like the British Commonwealth did. It's historically what has happened when whites become the minority or close to the minority, which they were in the early years of 1700s, 1800s, when states like Mississippi and Alabama, we dominated, is that they expanded the country. Louisiana Purchase, Alaska, and then they brought Europeans in by the droves. They brought millions of Europeans and Italians and Irish and Hispanics, those who spoke Spanish, not Hispanics, but Spanish, those who could bring balance to the black population. And I kind of see that's how they're going to do this, is it's going to become more the American Commonwealth, which will be a combination. I think NAFTA was a precursor to it, but I think that's how it's planned off. And they will redefine democracy to be more inclusive of people in North America and not just in the United States of America.
Well, you remember when President Trump floated that idea when he first went into office that perhaps we should become part of the Commonwealth? So he floated it out there. And that's
where I think they want to go.
Oh, okay.
I think we flipped it, but I think that's what the plan is.
Would that mean we would fall back under the umbrella of the British?
No, I think the British should be brought under our umbrella. I think they'll be brought in to us rather than us brought into them.
Fascinating perspective. Aaron Connolly. There's a lot to unpack here. Before we get to the callers, I want your thoughts about these numbers. Were you surprised by them? What do they mean to you? And what do you think they mean?
Well, good morning, Santita, and good morning to the panel. To be honest with you, I was surprised they weren't a little bit higher. I was relieved to see the population growth reflect the rest of the world. As you always say, we in America don't necessarily take into account what the global majority is and what the majority of the population looks like in many continents around the world. So I was heartened to see the increase because there were so many attempts during the census by the Trump administration to diminish turnout among minorities, among folks that are undocumented. And there were scare tactics used, and we saw the rally in many communities to turn out participation in that census. And I think at the very least, there is some underreporting still, but it looks like the numbers reflect the society that we actually live in when we go and walk out on the streets of Chicago or Los Angeles or Houston. I think Mr. David Daley's point about the redistricting is really what we have to laser focus on right now, right? And over the last 10 years, folks like Dave, folks like the Rainbow Push Coalition, many organizations, for example, All on the Line, the former OFA organization, is completely focused on national redistricting efforts with Eric Holder. We see this awareness within the politically active to shine a light on what these Republican-led panels do in many of these states to draw these districts in creative and ridiculous ways that take out many minority votes out of those districts, right? So as this increases, it's going to get harder for them to do that because, for example, we take a city like Phoenix that we saw is now part of a blue Arizona for the most part, at least dark purple. And when we see the population growth in the Hispanic Latino communities, it's not isolated into one part of that city. While in many cases it can be, that growth is all over, right? So it's going to get more and more difficult for these creative and I would say illegal panels to draw these districts. So we're going to have to pay more attention, take part in any open hearings that you see in your community to make your voice known and say, I want my community to look like my community on the map. So we see municipalities completely taken out of their neighbors. These are folks that live in communities that essentially have the same interest. If there's a town right next to you and that town's in a completely separate congressional district when, let's say, you share a school district even, how is that serving the community? So we need people to make their voices heard as these maps start being redrawn. And, as we saw a delay in reporting of the census data because the census was delayed, the process is going to be a little bit more rushed and a little bit more complicated. What we need to keep advocating for is independent commissions to have a say in how these maps are drawn. I think that's really where we see some accountability and pay attention to who these folks are that are appointed to these commissions. Do they have a real sense of equality and equity and service to the community, or are they partisan folks who really only have an interest in maintaining the status quo, whether that's a Republican or Democratic majority? We want this to have a lens of what's best for the people and who is representing the actual community. So sometimes we don't like to say this, but Democrats are guilty in certain places of also gerrymandering districts this way. So
Yeah.
it's going to get more difficult to do that on both sides. I know we're not supposed to say that, and it happens a lot less, right? Like if we break it down, most of the redistricting and gerrymandering is done by Republican leaders. But we also have to hold ourselves accountable as a fellow Democrat to make sure that we are being fair, and those lines do not look like a Tyrannosaurus Rex or a bow tie or something like that, and really are more close to a shape that's recognizable by a kindergartner and includes the communities that are next to each other that have the same interests. So that's my big concern. I think it's wonderful that America is answering as accurately as possible, right? We may not have seen this 10 years ago, that folks either didn't want to participate in the census or wouldn't necessarily identify as anything. That box would be left blank, right? So I think that is a good sign. I think it still is underreported, and I think what it will do is scare those folks that are trying to diminish participation even more. So I think they're going to up their game to try and redraw those districts because of that fear. If this is what it looks like in 2020, imagine what it'll look like in 10 years. So I think the panic button has been hit in the Republican Party on many fronts. So we're going to have to be even more diligent to make sure that our districts represent our people.
Well, these are the politics, everybody. And let me correct myself. In 1950, the world was 55% Asian, 21%, 21% European, and 9% African. By 2015, it was 59% Asian, 15% African, and 10% European. 2015, the projection is 54% Asian, 25% African, and 7.3% European. And by 2100, it will be 39% African, 43% Asian, 5.8% European. So let me correct myself. It's fascinating because, you know, these are the places that are growing all over the world. Let me get some of these callers in, everybody, because I just think that this is fascinating. It's fascinating stuff. Natalie from the South Side. How you doing, Natalie?
Good morning, Santita, and to your guests. 3 quick points. I think that while the white power structure was trying to prevent blacks from coming through the front door, they weren't watching who was coming through the side doors. And so, and my concern is, and I don't think it has anything to do with Republican or Democrat, because what they're not talking about, that white America is also the oldest population, and Latinos being the youngest and having the most children. You know, I think that needs to be talked about too as well. And then lastly, if I can tie this in, and this is just my opinion, for somebody who is hesitant with these vaccines, when you look at all these white powerful companies forcing you to take these shots, you know, it makes me even more hesitant now as to why, especially since they're seeing that the vaccines are not holding as well as they thought, and they're not talking about that as much. So for me, when I look at all of this, you know, because all things are relevant, Santita. All things are relevant. This is what I see when I look at this report.
You see a lot of other. Let me ask you this before you go, Natalie, because you've called us about the vaccines and about health a couple of times, and it's always fascinating to hear from you. And I certainly want to hear more from you, and I want the people to hear from you too. Do you find that amongst your friends, amongst the people you live around, do you have a minority view, or do you have a view that's shared by a lot of people?
Well, Santita, first of all, I'm a union official, so I try to be, I try not to involve myself in people's personal business as much.
But I mean, just conversationally, Natalie. I mean, what are people thinking from where you sit?
There are a lot of people who are getting it. There are a lot of people who were, well, I won't say a lot, but there are a few people who were disappointed about getting it, and there are people like me who don't want it at all. So it's an even, for me, it's an even mix. Even in my family, you know, some of them have gotten it, some of them haven't, and so it's just kind of all over the map.
Okay.
And having had some negative personal experiences with the medical situations, I think that's what most informs my opinion.
Okay.
Things that actually happen to me personally, and so things that I know firsthand, you know, there is such thing as bad medicine.
Well, you know what? Honestly, you know, I want you to call back, and we'll talk about this another time. But I said, you know, if I got you back on the phone anytime soon, I wanted to ask you that question. But, you know, girl, I got to move on and get some of the other people in. But, you know, Natalie, we always love hearing from you because you are so insightful, so insightful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sending you much love. Let me go to Renee Criswell. Renee, what's on your mind, Renee?
Good morning, and thanks for taking the call of an insomniac who still tries to listen to your show even when I'm only operating on 2 hours of sleep.
Thank you.
But
You and me both. How about that?
I think you handle it much better than I do, though, Santita.
I don't know.
But I just wanted to say one thing that many of the Democrats and Republicans in power have in common is their whiteness. And people want to preserve themselves, right? And if they're looking at these numbers, the projected demographics and stuff of what the population would be, then they would come up with a plan. And I think that's what they do. They saw the numbers and they launched a plan called Divide and Conquer. It's the plan that has always worked. When you divide people, then they're weak. So I think that the corporate media and our government, I think they sometimes work together. And I think they launched this plan where they started showing Black people who, like you said, historically, one drop of Black blood, you're Black, period. And people in the past who had that one drop, they didn't say they were mixed. They knew that they were Black. They were treated like they were Black, and they were strength in numbers. Black people, after slavery, went to Black communities. They built those communities up. During the Civil Rights Movement and every other movement that we've had where we had any type of power, is because we all identified as being Black. We didn't call ourselves mixed at that time, and they wouldn't let us call ourselves mixed. But then a few years ago, you started seeing on television all these happy biracial families, Cheerio commercials with the happy biracial families. You stopped seeing, we never did have a lot of positive Black families on TV. We had a few, but you stopped seeing Black couples with Black children,
The
especially
Cosbys.
if it was a positive role.
That's right, the Cosby
So
Show.
They're
Stop seeing
dividing
that.
and
The Evans family.
And you know,
That's right.
my daughter, she's 28 years old, and she always talks to me about people on social media saying they're not Black, they're Caribbean, or I'm Haitian, or I'm mixed. And I always talk to her about it's just them dividing us so they can weaken our numbers. If you don't identify with the group, you're not going to care possibly about what's happening to that part of the group that's identified as being Black. Same thing with Hispanics, Asians, and Blacks. With the numbers, their numbers going up, it makes me think about Chicago, where Harold Washington had this strong coalition of Hispanics and Blacks and Asians, and that helped propel him to office as mayor. But when he died, the first thing they did was they created the Hispanic Democratic Organization. They took away jobs from Black people. They gave them to Hispanic people. They built them schools right down the street. I live across some little village. Built them schools, gave us nothing, closed our schools. It was to divide and conquer.
Well, you know, let me
Al Sanchez even said they did that.
Well, stay right there, because I think what they did was shrink our piece of the pie, because the size of the pie for Black and brown people did not increase. You know, whites continued to get. They just left us to fight amongst ourselves, you know, because they didn't take jobs from us. They were redistributed away from us. You know what I mean? I think we need to be very clear on the game that's played. That's why we signed the Brown Coalition that we saw in Texas, because they have come together to fight, and we need to stop playing these. We need to stop playing these games and stop getting played. Dwight, why don't you respond to what you heard in the news, CK, and then you, Aaron. Dwight, I only have about a couple of minutes for you, and then a couple of minutes for CK, and then a couple of minutes for Aaron. Dwight?
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is they've always accomplished that geographically more than demographically. Is that Alaska was part of Russia. It didn't become a state until 1959. I was alive when Alaska became a state. Texas was part of Mexico. It used to not be Texas. It was Mexico and New Mexico. They do this geographically. Louisiana was part of France. What they do, what the United States does, is they expand geographically, and then they absorb those populations, which are mostly white. They become mostly white because they send white people there, and then they bring them into the American experience and redefine what America is. Hawaii, when our group started out in grammar school, Hawaii was not part of the United States. It didn't become a state until 1959. So that's what I'm talking about, is that we should probably be looking at that. The strategy would probably be more of an expansion of the country northward, where the white people are, into Canada, and we become more of a United States of a Commonwealth of United States experience, and the politics, the political strength, the economic strength will be expanded to the north. They won't be able to beat us in the United States on a population issue because white people are not repopulating at that rate for some real reasons. But what they can do is they can keep expanding geographically and bringing in swabs of white people into the American experience. So look for a reconfiguration of the country in the next 30 to 40 years.
Aaron Connolly, your thoughts, couple of minutes?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on this subject. I think what I found really fascinating was when we look at the city by city data breakdown on the census, and we see where this migration is taking place currently, and some of the implications that has moving forward regarding climate change. We see throughout the world right now in Europe, there's wildfires in Greece and Turkey taking over. We see huge heat domes in the Pacific Northwest. And some of these migrations are counterintuitive to what is really happening on our planet and in our country. And I just like to bring that up because the climate report that came out this week was devastating, essentially saying we can't really turn back the clock. So I think in the next 10 years, as these weather events start getting more and more severe, some of these migrations may reverse themselves or take a different direction. We see a lot of folks moving out west, going to places like Arizona. Arizona in 10 years is going to be a lot hotter than it is now. And we look at temperatures in the summer of 120, 130. How do we maintain a growth in population in these areas where we see water supplies closing up and drying up, right? So I think that is kind of the bigger issue that I saw, and taking all of the week's news into account.
But Aaron,
the country's going to look very different in the next census than it did in this one.
Well, Aaron, in furtherance of your point, CK and I were just in Paris, 2-3 weeks ago, CK?
Yeah.
And Paris was more diverse than we've ever seen it. It was mind-boggling.
Really?
Because of course, with the collapse of the Libyan government, first of all, they've opened the door to Africa, which is what President Gaddafi said was going to happen. So, and for these people, remember, Europe has colonized all of these countries, and the people they've colonized are coming to Europe because Western powers continue to break their states. Right? So Libya is now a failed state. So the Libyans are coming where they can find some jobs. They you broke it, you fix it.
And
so
and to the cultural centers where those colonizers have made accessible, right? If you understand French, you speak French, you are more likely to go to France than
it's the mother country.
European country.
It's the mother country. But but
really great point.
Oh no! I mean, I'm buttressing your point. I mean, really, it's literally 120 seconds. CK, your final thoughts? I'm looking at the clock.
I know. To further buttress your point, 1967, when I first went to school in Switzerland, literally there were people who thought black people had tails. I was pointed to, my sisters and I, and called a monkey by a little girl who really literally thought that we had tails, because Hitler had people believing in the 1940s during the Olympics that black people had tails and we were monkeys. So when you fast forward now, and the demographics, like Santita said, in Paris, in France, and I lived in France too in the 80s, it's so vastly different, but it was completely predictable as countries started decolonizing. So now we come to the United States and we see something else that's completely predictable. We have two options. Either we fight it, change the numbers, manipulate, commit fraud, but ultimately at the end of the day, the truth will come out. So we need to embrace whatever we are here in the United States and fight against voter suppression, because it's all connected. Fight against all of this very, very oppressive legislation that is designed to keep and hold down minority populations, including some of the gerrymandering, some of the manipulations with the census count. While we were on the air, Santita, I spoke to 3 people. One Latino person, and I asked him, how do you identify on the census? He said, oh, of course, Hispanic. He's black. There's a black Latino person.
Yeah.
An Asian person who's black. He said, oh, Asian. So there are 2, and the other person was a white person who said, well, white, but, sometimes I have Native American. Sometimes I say Native American.
Thank you.
But nobody is going to identify as black if they have a second cultural heritage.
Would you say that one more time? Do you remember Bang Bang Traveling All-Stars and Motor Kings and Richard Pryor's character? He was trying to break out of the Negro Leagues into the major leagues. And he tried he was an Indian at one point. Then the last iteration of humanity he became was Hispanic. He was determined to get into the major leagues. It's kind of funny, but not. But you know what? Hold that thought. I'm gonna get closing thoughts from everybody on the other side on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. You know what? Pay attention. Pay attention. You know what? Don't despair. No one should despair. Everyone should feel good about these numbers, because this means that, in its own, we're maturing. This is the world, everybody. We are the world. Country on earth. We're everything. We're everybody. That's it. And I hope that our politics will catch up so that we treat everybody as a human being equally. What did Dr. King say? We have to come to a point where we treat man or woman as woman or man. Let's just treat each other fairly, equally, everybody, with equity. Stay right here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Have a great weekend. See you on Keep Up Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson on Sunday. God bless. You guys, Aaron, I didn't want to cut you off, or CK, because you all are making some great points. Because Aaron, you and CK are driving on politics. You're like, you guys, we are becoming a minority country, which, quite frankly, Dwight made the point. All during slavery, Aaron, throughout the South, the blacks were in the majority. Now we're moving back, right? Yeah. So it's like this should not be earth shaking, but it is. It is earth shaking for some people. For some,
it is for a lot of people.
For a lot of people, it is. So that's why I wanted to ask you. Just so where are we going with this? Because California lost a seat, right? Illinois lost a seat, and you're making the point, Aaron, that wait a minute, wherever we see this growth with people of color, they're losing seats. They're getting gerrymandered. We're getting gerrymandered out of power. So it's becoming even more lopsided, Aaron, politically. So what's the alternative? What is the solution, shall I say?
Well, the solution is really, I think, demanding these more and more of these independent commissions. We should never have one party in power making these choices. And I think I do see hope on that front, but in all honesty, I don't think it's going to even out until the next census, when we have more younger folks in power that have learned things like, I don't like to call it critical race theory, but I like to call it factual history. And
there's that.
And understand the importance of balancing our representation, right? It's completely lopsided, and it's not reflective of our society, and it's not fair. If there's always these arguments of, fairness and openness and honesty, let's live these values and look at the data, right? But as you know, this takes organizing. And it's not a fun, sexy thing to organize around, redistricting necessarily,
No.
but having your vote count and having someone represent you that looks like you, that understands you, that has lived in your community, that knows what it's like to live the life your mother lived or your grandmother lived, or actually even cares. Maybe they didn't have that commonality growing up, but they understand and respect your culture instead of minimize it or mock it. those things are becoming more and more important to folks. And I think it's going to be harder and harder, especially in states. You referenced North Carolina, for example. That's a really good example of a southern state, in many cities, right, a segregated state. And it's going to get more and more difficult as Latinos and Hispanics move into states like North Carolina to apportion them into specific districts. And we'll see more and more of those districts become competitive, but only if we continue to focus on those areas as organizers, as Democrats in a political party. We need to be investing in those communities that are growing with the folks that share those values, right? If we just take it for granted and assume that, folks will turn out simply because they are Black or brown or Asian for certain types of candidates, that's where we lose when we start making those assumptions. We still have to, as Democrats, articulate that vision, those values, and frankly, continue to expand what that means, right? We can't just hold on to the values we've had. We have to understand our new voters, what motivates them, especially as younger people get more and more involved. And I think in battleground states like North Carolina, like Arizona, like Texas, as we see Houston's population expanding as well, we can't take those votes for granted. For example, really quickly, the Hispanic population does not always align with Democratic candidates, right? And we see that being more competitive in Florida and Texas. And there were some errors made, I believe, in the last cycle where we assume that Hispanic and Latino voters are automatically going to vote with Democrats. And we saw Miami-Dade County, for example, that the turnout was a lot lower because we were making assumptions and not necessarily doing the same work that we need to.
Well, that's a New York Times article, right? That says that, they are growing the GOP because you also have white Hispanics who align their politics with whiteness. That's why I think it's important. And then you also have Black people who are not from the African American, who are not from the Black slavery experience, who align themselves with whiteness too, or with a majority, with the power of, with the majority, or with power, not with people who are the least of these. So, I think that underneath all of this, we have to look at all of that, Aaron, as you and CK and Dwight are pointing out. There are a lot of layers to this. Because it's not just a color you identify with, it's a power position, right?
It's a power position. Yes. And Santita, if I could just piggyback a little bit on what Aaron said, let's think of Ted Cruz for just 1 second. Ted Cruz. Yes.
You and Aaron's favorite person?
Ted Cruz. He is, I need to take a step back, take a deep breath, and be professional. So Ted Cruz is he's a part. His parents were immigrants to this country
from Cuba.
He is from Cuba. He's a Cuban American. Okay, I don't know how he identified on the census, but he definitely. I would venture to say if he had the option of white, Black, Hispanic, Asian American, he might first go with white. I don't know this because there's no distinction between white Latino or Black Latino or Hispanic, however it's because I didn't see Latinx on anything. So, but there's not a distinction that I recall when I filled out the census. And so you have a number of people. I lived in Florida as well. I lived in South Florida. So you're going to have large numbers of Hispanics, Latinos, or Latinx. I don't know however you would like to characterize, which is a cultural designation that may not go with a Black-white distinction, but will go with a cultural distinction. And so the numbers are going to be a little bit different. Or they may go with the white distinction and not Hispanic. So I think that we have to be very, very careful with that. And again, I just polled some people. They just thought I was crazy. You work for the government? Are you? And I said, no. I just wanted to know, just out of curiosity. This is while other of your guests were talking. I just said, let me just do a little test here in Atlanta. So the only point that I'm making is we are becoming a real melting pot. Canada is a melting pot. I don't know why we're so afraid of this melting pot concept. Canada really is a melting pot. It's got real communities real cultural differences, and they make it work. But they've been at this. They've had that dynamic, real dynamic, where the groups have fought for representation for a long time. We're behind Canada, in my impression. Canada may have some other issues, but on that front, we're behind them. So I just think what we have to be mindful of is this is what we are. It should not be a political issue whether you're black or white or Latino, whatever. That should not be political. That's who you are. Just for it to be turned into a political issue, which is inextricably linked to voter suppression, to people's position on the homeless population. Because if you're homeless, the chances of you voting are diminished. The majority of the homeless populations, well, I don't say the majority, vast numbers of the homeless populations that I see in some of these cities are black and brown people. That's not to diminish the fact that there are many, many poor white people who are part of the homeless population. Homelessness should not either be a political issue. It's a human rights issue. It is a societal issue that we must tackle in this country. It shouldn't be tackled along race lines and tied to voting and tied to all these other things. So my hope is that we continue to fight with independent, I like the idea of independent commissions that examine these issues and come up with reports so we can just speak truth to power. Whatever it is, it's going to be. You're not going to suppress the increase in the numbers of black and brown people. That's not going to be possible. In Asian America, it's just not going to be possible. It's just not going to be possible. So we need to be about the business of embracing it because we don't want to have young folks love about these young folks who are our future leaders. You saw them protesting and marching over the past couple of years. They weren't so concerned about the black or white, if we protested with black people or not. They were concerned about what they felt was right and what was wrong. They felt that they needed to align the Black Lives Matter, no matter what their color, on that rainbow coalition that Reverend Jackson and Dr. King spoke of, because of what was right, was not right. Police brutality not being right. And we have to do better. And that is where we're headed. So if we try to duck and dodge with these census numbers that are not quite reflective of our communities, then we're going to have a severe problem. So that's how I see it, Santita, Aaron, David, and I'm not sure who else is on.
Dwight's still here.
That's how I see it.
Well,
Dwight,
no, I mean,
Dwight is the original. Dwight is, I won't say the original, but I mean the older Dwight than I am, especially since I dropped about 20 years every week. But I do think that you have lived a life. Well, I mean, there's that. If somebody believes I'm 37, I'm going with it.
Okay.
But you have lived and seen so much in the fights that you have championed. And this, to me, is just another layer, but on the trajectory of what we've been fighting for decades.
Look, I'm hearing you. I mean, Dwight.
That's why I say that. That's why I'm saying to you all, having seen how this works, is that the role of America, United States of America, is the military arm of Western civilization. Is we keep seeing the United States as an entity unto itself, but the United States is really part of a greater white community that includes Europe and Canada and Australia. And so what they will end up doing is, because white supremacy is not just an American experience. White supremacy is the theology of Western civilization. And they've colonized the world, and they intend to keep it a colonial world. And who they're competing with is not the Hispanics or us or, the Native Americans. Who they're competing with is the Chinese. And at some levels, the Russians. They're competing for world domination. And so they're so that they can be able to get positions, their superior positions in the world economy. This is so much bigger than the United States of America. and democracy in America, because you're talking about the planet. You're talking about the globe. You're talking about geopolitical politics at an international level. And so that's where we have to start thinking that this won't be solved at a level of, whether or not we have more votes in Texas. This is going to be dealt with at the UN and at the World Bank and at Bilderberg. This is a international situation that we're looking at. One of the things you find out with the white people is what they do is when they fall behind, they change the rules. Simone Biles said one of the things that gave her such anxiety is because she found out that she had to do more to break even than anybody else.
Well, they changed the rules, right? They changed the scoring system.
They changed the scoring system. I'm gonna have to run, unfortunately. I just looked at the time. I have to run to a meeting. But this has been great. I hate to interrupt you, Dwight and Santita and everyone, but I have to run to a meeting, and I hated to interrupt. But thank you for this discussion, and I look for part 2.
Bye-bye. When Tiger Woods started dominating golf, they changed the golf courses. When Kareem played basketball in college, they outlawed the dunk. It was illegal to dunk in college when Kareem was the dominant player. They changed the rules. And what you'll see is an international rules change when it comes to the United States and white supremacy and supremacy of Western civilization.
Well, Aaron, you and Dwight are the last 2 people standing. Your thoughts before we go?
Well, I just want to thank all of you for having deep conversations like this. It's
Aaron is like, when she sends me a text in the middle of the night, what is she asking me for? It's like when I reach out to you, like, oh, I see the eyes roll. He's like, what is this girl?
Oh,
what is
never.
I'm having fun with you. You know, you're my sister. So,
I'm always excited to talk to you.
what is going on? What is she asking me to talk about this time?
No, it's always I always learn something. And as a student of political science and history, I love that about your show. Especially, Dwight, I just want to thank you for your knowledge and wisdom that you provide. You always teach me something every time we're on a panel together, and I really appreciate all of this.
Every time.
One thing I did want to say about the redistricting pieces is that specific to the city of Chicago, we have a remap process on the local level, and you are able to participate as a citizen, as a resident of Chicago in that process. So I encourage everyone who's local in the Chicagoland area to take a look at that and what that will mean for our city. We did not see a huge exodus as expected from Chicago, as many predicted. But those numbers could have changed significantly from April, even since, as you know, I am one of them. I am no longer a resident of the city of Chicago. I moved up north. So, but that exodus trend was not in line with some of the predictions. So, but we will have the opportunity to remap our local level as well as our federal level, and I just encourage everybody to take a look at what they can do in their ward, in their county, to make sure that they're a part of that process.
Amen. Dwight, your final thoughts?
No, I'm finished for the day. I'm just want everybody to be very vigilant and think long range and global rather than, local and short range.
Mm-hmm.
I predicted 2 years ago, that the big thoughts this time was going to be voter nullification, because that's kind of how this thing works. It's as soon as we start making progress, the rules change, and that's going to always be the case, in my opinion. One of the reasons they want to stop teaching real history, real Black history, is because, as I said before, that the truth will set you free, and if people don't want you to know the truth, so they don't want you to be free. This whole economy internationally is built on white supremacy and third world colonialism, whether it be the Middle East colonialized for their oil, whether it be African colonized for their minerals, whether it be India colonized for their spices. It's how this world is situated, and that's what is going to. It's the basis of the world economy, and we have to see this more as a world situation.
Absolutely. 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 Well, you know what I tell you? I always love talking with you all because I learned so much. And I just think that we need to keep learning and stay vigilant and really move toward having a fair world. No one needs to be colonized. That is not your oil underneath their sand wherever the oil is. Okay? It's just not. And we're all going to have to learn to share this planet together. Okay? Just and be fair. That's it. That's it. And so, this great awakening, this great reset that we're seeing, really is about getting things right because they've been wrong for so long. So let's get it all together, everybody. And yes, Effie Rolfe, Simone had to do more than the others. It's not surprising, right? No, of course. They changed the scoring system. Like they changed the golf courses once Tiger started winning. You just keep on going, 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 you know. And it's like, look, you don't need to change the game. You need to elevate yours. But we need to recognize the game, okay? That you still have to be superior in order to be considered equal, which is when you are articulate as a Black person, what's so irritating, Dwight and Aaron, people will tell me down through the years, I know you were raised with white people. No, I was raised by Black people around Black people. Do I have white friends and I have white classmates? Yes. But how insulting. What? No, it's
So
just.
let me close with this, Santita, if I can, quickly.
Mm-hmm.
The good part of the game yesterday with the Field of Dreams, is at least the White Sox didn't throw the game to Aaron Ross team.
You are terrible. What was it? What was it somebody's what shoe? Yes, Lord have mercy. Aaron, don't pay any attention to him. He would remember that. That was such a sweet game, and I used to have the mad crush on who is it on oh goodness, on Kevin Costner.
Yes.
Oh
Did
my
you see
gosh.
the pictures of him throwing out the pitch?
Girl, come on. Yes, and I still love him to pieces. What? So that's all I could think about. When I saw him walk through the fields, I was like, yes, 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 that's all I want to see. So, Dwight, you just go on and leave my field of dreams right where it is. Okay. Bull Durham and all that. I'm loving Kevin.
That's why I say we live in mythology, because the original thing is about the White Sox throwing the World Series in 1919.
And they did throw it.
The game out the gamblers.
Oh, wait a minute. And they did throw it, and they have not been able to get it together since they threw that. Oh, Dwight, Aaron, Dwight always brings these things up. He likes busting our bubbles. And we're like, why'd you say that? Why'd you say that? And I do remember Margaret Thatcher talking about the Europe on both sides of the Atlantic. How about that? And remember, Canada is a Commonwealth. They are half French, half British. So think about it. This is we still are. And as much as they talk about the Hispanics are coming, the Latinos are coming. The first part of this colonial project was the Spaniards. Okay, so yes, Gene. Is this my Gene from Roberta Flack Gene? Yes, I always loved Kevin Costner. Look, I love men in general. How about that? Yeah, I love his movies. I've loved his movies. I've loved his movies. Mel Gibson's politics, well, they're problematic, but I love his movies. I'm able to separate, certainly him from his film. But I love Kevin Costner. There's something about him that I've always liked. I've just always liked him. There was something warm and kind of vulnerable. I like that. I like sweet men. I do. I don't like men who are hard and not nice. I don't like that. I'm not accustomed to it. So there you go. Yeah, that's right. The Bodyguard, Whitney's Bodyguard. Yes, that's right. That's right. That's about to have a moment.
Kevin Costner marathon today.
Girl, I need one. Is there one on TV today? Really? Is there one?
No, but I'm going to make one.
What he played Sheila Joe Jackson in the movie. What Sheila Joe Jackson is remembered more about is say it ain't so, Joe. Say you didn't steal the money. You didn't take the money. Say it ain't so, Joe. But they turn him to a hero because they rewrite history, always to their benefit.
Of course.
Assalamu alaikum, y'all.
Don't eat ham, cheese, or bacon. How about that? That's what some of my friends used to say. It was crazy. I love you, everybody. We just having fun getting off this hair. But look, everybody, pay attention and let's grow up in our politics. Everybody, get registered to vote and let's create a more perfect union in which everyone is treated fairly and with love, justice, mercy. That's right, the good things. We're but a thought away from having a more perfect union and a more perfect world. I love you, everybody. Thank you for the Jackson Show. Everybody, like and share, like and share, like and share. And please, thank you for liking so much. And like and share, like and share, like and share. You always thought of me as a more Sean Connery type. Yeah, the Sean Connery from the first iteration of James Bond. But he's not someone I would ever go out with. You know, I thought he was very handsome. No question about that. But there's a sweetness that he doesn't have. He looked like he would. He threw women across haystacks and whatnot. I want a man like that. What's that about? I love y'all. I'm out. God bless you, everybody. Have a great one.